It is now my honor to invite to the Bima Rabbi Jonah Pesner, Director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, to mark this 20th anniversary of Just Congregations.
You can clap for that. That's fine. Thank you. You can also applaud our incredible service leaders. Thank you to our dear friends from Washington Hebrew Congregation. Last night, we were inspired by the incredible leadership of Temple Sinai, D.C., this morning, Washington Hebrew Congregation, and our own amazing Vice President of the Union for Reform Judaism, Rabbi Esther Letterman. And it was very important to me, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, it was very important to me this Shabbat morning as we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Just Congregations and honoring some of the key leaders who made it happen. We wouldn't be here as an organizing entity that we are in Iraq without Just Congregations and the leadership of these leaders. I asked Esther to lead the service because back 20 years ago, she was the very first HUC student rabbinic intern that we hired to be an organizing rabbinic intern. And she's done pretty well, right? You're welcome. I love her so much. Oh my. In just a few moments, we're going to read the story of Joseph, right? We know Joseph. He did what? Joseph the dreamer, dreamed a lot of dreams. Now, remember, the dreams in this Torah portion are a bit of a cautionary tale because Joseph dreamed dreams of greatness, but then he lorded his greatness over his brothers, which wind up getting cast in a pit and sold into slavery. So if I've learned anything in my 25 years as a community organizing rabbi, it's that it is good to have some ego. I often say, it's okay, have a little ego, but if you have a dream, you better bring all your people along with you to dream with you. Can I get an amen? Amen. 20 years ago, some of us had a dream. We were experiencing the profound power of congregation-based community organizing. Churches across North America were winning victories. They were led by impacted people who had become citizens leaders, and they were winning campaigns for public education, affordable housing, healthcare access, and more. And they were doing it deeply rooted in their faith tradition and their theological imperative for justice. We were a handful of rabbis and cantors and Jewish lay leaders, maybe a minion, and I don't think that many, and some funders who kept showing up in these spaces that were mostly Christian. And we would bring our congregants along fully as Jews. And we realized that relational organizing could not only secure victories for social justice, but we understood they could transform our very synagogues and Jewish institutions. We had this dream that one-on-one conversations, small group encounters of listening campaigns, all rooted in deeply Jewish learning and experiences, could grow our people power to bring more leverage to the faith community and achieve justice. But we also dreamt that our congregations would, in so doing, become thriving communities of purpose in which people were seen and were heard, where they would tell their stories, hear each other's stories, be grounded in their tradition, and see themselves in it fully as members, and then see those values in the public square. Now, I'm going to go off script for a minute because there's someone here this morning I didn't know was going to be here. Because a lot of this we're figuring it out in the late 90s and early 2000s. But there's one Jewish lay leader who I'm aware of, who as early as the early 90s was one of the first Jewish volunteers to show up in a mostly Christian, interfaith organizing entity and realize what was happening and bring not only her own synagogue, Temple Israel of Boston, not only the JCRC of Greater Boston, but all the other synagogues along and a young rabbi who went kicking and screaming, saying, "What is all this organizing?" And that's Fran Godine of Temple Israel in Boston, who is here with us. Fran is very shy, which is why I didn't know she was even going to be here, but she's going to wave, and in a little while, there she is. Thank you, Fran. Many of who in this room is a lay leader that has taught a rabbi a thing or two? Raise your hands, okay? You're a Fran Godine. You know what I'm talking about? So thank you for all that you teach us. And we are joined also by the spectacular, incredible, and inspirational Rabbi Jenny Rosen. Rabbi, you can clap. Rabbi Jenny Rosen. Liz Dunce, how many minutes did I get? 2. Thanks for indulging me. She shared that dream. Jenny was a pioneering funder of the Jewish social justice sector. I want to argue that Jenny founded the Jewish social justice sector, meaning she understood that there were lots of groups and organizations doing justice, Rabbi Saperstein and so many others, but they were all off doing it differently and not collectively. As the leadership of the Nathan Cummings Foundation, she, with Schiffer Bonzik, an incredible professional, gathered together all the leaders in the sector and asked, what could we do if we did it together? She also saw what was happening in synagogues that were emerging as part of these broad-based interfaith, mostly Christian coalitions. She was seeing that individual congregations were transforming, that individual broad-based groups were becoming more powerful. And she dreamt a dream that we could get to scale, that it would become normative in synagogue life, that Jews would organize. And we have to acknowledge in this space Rabbi David Saperstein, because Jenny went to David, or David went to Jenny, I'm not sure who went to who, and they asked the question, how could we scale this up? And one of you had this like, well, you know, that thing that like Jonah and his people and Fran are doing in Boston. And we had this idea that maybe we could get to scale if we just invested some resources and launched this thing, which was called Just Congregations, the effort of the Reformed Jewish movement launched by the URJ and the RAC to get congregations into every congregation in America. And by the time Just Congregations folded into the RAC, 10 years later, we were in more than 300 communities across North America. That was the scale that Jenny was looking to get to. Now, I want to acknowledge also sitting next to Jenny Rosen is an incredible leader who many of you know well, who at the time was with the Jewish Fund for Justice, was also seeing this and convened many of us. There was a historic conference at some like hotel in Morristown, New Jersey, or Summit, New Jersey, where she brought us all together to say, wait a second, we're not doing this alone. What if we did this together? And that is Julie Weil, who later on joined the staff of Just Congregations and ultimately was actually for a while the director of Just Congregations and helped us launch RAC Illinois. Where are you, Illinois? Chicago. Oh, my Chicago peeps, you gotta have more ego. One of the things that Jenny really challenged us to do, though, was also to say, don't hinge on one grant. This can't be just about the Nathan Cummings Foundation. And so I want to just invoke 2 other names, 2 amazing Reformed Jewish women who could not be here today because they can't travel. But Jeannie Ungerleiter, who is a member of Temple Israel in Boston and runs the Dorot Foundation, saw what we were doing and also said, if the Nathan Cummings Foundation is in, the Dorot Foundation is going to be in as well. And Alice and her beloved Zichrono Livracha, Mike Kuhn. Alice and Mike Kuhn, who grew up poor with nothing and became very successful. And their number one priority was alleviating poverty by investing in impacted people to lift themselves up and to organize power to end poverty. That is their passion. That is what Alice gets up in the morning for. And to get the Jews to show up in that space. For Alice Kuhn, it is about Jews showing up in multi-faith, interracial settings to alleviate and end poverty. We couldn't build the Just Congregations or the RAC as it is. And finally, one other name that I have to invoke. As Just Congregations were growing, some of us might have been very focused on the right coast, the East Coast, the New York, Washington, Boston corridor, because maybe that's where we hung out. And we knew that was a problem. And thankfully, the amazing Rabbi Stephanie Colin, who had this incredible idea to bring community organizing to the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, which is not nothing, and innovated the very first seminary training program for cantorial, rabbinic, and education students and Jewish professionals, which has now trained not dozens, but hundreds and hundreds of rabbis, cantors, and educators in community organizing. How many of the clergy in this room took the training when they were, so you can see the fruits of that effort. She agreed to join us at Just Congregations, and I just said, Steph, go out to California and figure it out. That became Reform California, which became RAC California. Where are you, California? Which then taught us how to do this work. Without Steph Colin, we would not have figured out how to do this work, because now we are in 9 states, representing 60% of the American Jewish community. That's the legacy of Rabbi Steph Colin. And I just want to also acknowledge Lila Foldis, who was on the staff from the very beginning, who was amazing. And, of course, Joy Friedman, who was with us until only last year. Both Joy and Lila weren't able to be here either. And then finally, one other name to invoke. When I launched Just Congregations, I was like, okay, be strategic. Get to the influential rabbis who are going to be able to really get this out into the field. And so I showed up in Scarsdale one day at the office of one Rabbi, Rick Jacobs, and I said, hey, you want to help us do this Just Congregations thing? He, of course, had the cloud. He brought all of the Westchester rabbis together. We built something called Westchester Together. It was a great project for what it was, but I think it all showed us a picture, and it led, I think, ultimately when Rick was elected president of the URJ and called me and said, hey, would you join me in this work? And everybody knows I have 2 titles, right? Senior Vice President of the URJ, Director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, but actually my favorite title is the 3rd that Rick added, which is Organizer-in-Chief. So now it's time to actually do some Torah. So as we prepare for the Torah service, I want to invite Fran Godin, Julie Weil, Rabbi Stephanie Colin, and the great Rabbi Jenny Rosen, all 4 of you, to come up and help us lead the Torah service. You can applaud for that, and I think you can also, is it time to stand up for Torah?
Yes.
You can stand up for the Torah.
Page 166.